Captain Marcus Wellington had served the royal family for 15 years, and he prided himself on following every rule in the protocol manual. His uniform was always pressed, his boots polished to mirror perfection, and his attention to detail was legendary among the palace staff. The other guards often joked that Marcus could recite the entire security handbook backwards while standing at attention. On this particular Tuesday morning, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Marcus took his position at the main entrance. The royal family was expecting several important visitors throughout the day, including foreign diplomats and wealthy merchants seeking trade agreements. Everything had to be perfect. As Marcus stood guard, he noticed a small figure approaching the palace gates. It was a young girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with tangled brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. She carried a worn canvas bag over her shoulder and walked, with the determined stride of someone on an important mission. The girl stopped directly in front of Marcus and looked up at him with bright green eyes that seemed far too intelligent for her age. She didn't speak immediately, but instead began making strange hand gestures. Her fingers moved in quick, deliberate patterns, forming shapes that meant nothing to Marcus. According to protocol, Marcus should have immediately asked the child to move along. Unauthorized individuals were not permitted to loiter near the palace entrance, especially not during high-security days like this one. The manual was very clear about such situations, but something about the girl's intense expression made Marcus hesitate. She wasn't playing or being mischievous like most children her age might be. There was an urgency in her movements, a desperation in her eyes that suggested she was trying to communicate something important. The girl continued her strange hand signals, growing more animated when she realized Marcus was watching. She pointed toward the palace, then back at herself, then made a series of rapid gestures that looked almost like a dance. Other guards had noticed the interaction and were beginning to whisper among themselves. Marcus knew he was breaking protocol by not immediately dismissing the child, but his instincts told him something significant was happening. The girl's behavior was too purposeful, too urgent to be mere child's play. She seemed to be trying to tell him something crucial, but without words. Her message remained a mystery. As the minutes passed, Marcus found himself drawn deeper into the puzzle of the girl's silent communication. He had no idea that this unexpected encounter would soon reveal a secret that would shake the very foundations of the royal household. The morning grew warmer as Marcus continued to watch the mysterious girl. She had been making her hand gestures for nearly 20 minutes now, and her frustration was becoming more evident. Tears began to form in her eyes, but she refused to give up on whatever message she was trying to convey. Sergeant Davies, Marcus's immediate superior, approached with heavy footsteps. "Wellington, what's the meaning of this? Why haven't you moved this child along? You know the protocol as well as anyone." Marcus straightened but kept his eyes on the girl. "Sir, I believe she's trying to tell us something important. Look at her hands, the way she's moving them." "It's not random." Davies scoffed and stepped forward to address the child directly. "Young lady, you need to move away from the palace immediately. This is a restricted area." The girl looked between the two guards with growing panic. She began her gestures again, this time even more frantically. Her small hands moved rapidly through the air, forming shapes and patterns that seemed to follow some kind of system. That's when Marcus remembered something from his childhood. His younger sister had been born deaf, and their family had learned basic sign language to communicate with her. While Marcus was far from fluent, he recognized that the girl's movements had the rhythm and structure of sign language. "Sir, I think she's using sign language," Marcus said quietly. "She might be deaf or mute." Davies raised an eyebrow but looked more carefully at the girl's movements. "Even if that's true, we can't allow unauthorized individuals near the palace. Security comes first." But Marcus was already trying to remember the few signs he knew. He raised his own hands and slowly signed the word help, one of the few signs he could recall clearly. The girl's eyes widened with relief and hope. She nodded vigorously and began signing more slowly, clearly hoping Marcus would understand. She pointed toward the palace again, then made a gesture that looked like she was indicating a person. Then she did something that chilled Marcus to the bone. She drew her finger across her throat in the universal gesture for danger. The girl continued her desperate communication, pointing to her bag and then to the palace. She opened the canvas bag and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper covered with drawings and what looked like a rough map of the palace grounds. The sketches showed figures moving through corridors and marked specific locations with ominous symbols. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he studied the crude but detailed drawings. Someone had given this child information about the palace layout, and judging by her urgent warnings about danger, this wasn't innocent curiosity. Davies leaned in to look at the paper, his skepticism beginning to fade. "Wellington, I think we need to take this seriously. Get someone from the communications office who knows sign language now." As Marcus radioed for assistance, the girl continued signing frantically, pointing repeatedly at her drawings and then at the clock tower visible above the palace walls. Time seemed to be running out for whatever she was trying to warn them about. Within minutes, Elena Rodriguez from the palace communications office arrived at the main gate. Elena had learned sign language years ago when working with disabled veterans, and she was known throughout the palace for her linguistic skills. Her face was serious as Davies quickly explained the situation. Elena knelt down to the girl's eye level and began signing slowly and clearly. The relief on the child's face was immediate and overwhelming. Finally, someone could understand her desperate message. The conversation that followed through rapid hand movements was unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed. The girl's signs became increasingly animated and urgent. Elena's expression grew darker with each exchange, her face pale with growing alarm. "What is she saying?" Davies demanded impatiently. Elena held up a hand for silence, continuing to sign with the girl for several more minutes. Finally, she turned to the two guards with a grave expression. "Her name is Sophie Chen. She's the daughter of Master Chen, the palace's head chef. 3 days ago, she was playing in the storage areas beneath the kitchen when she overheard a conversation between two men she didn't recognize." Elena paused, checking her notes from the conversation. According to Sophie, these men were discussing a plan to poison the royal family during today's state dinner. They mentioned something about the wine that's being served to the foreign diplomats. Marcus felt his blood run cold. The state dinner was scheduled for that evening, with over 50 important guests expected to attend. If Sophie's information was accurate, they were facing an assassination attempt of unprecedented scale. "She drew this map from memory," Elena continued, pointing to the child's crude sketches. "She's marked the locations where she saw the men talking and where they seemed to be planning to hide something. Look here, she's drawn what appears to be small bottles near the wine cellar." Davies immediately activated his emergency radio. "This is Sergeant Davies requesting immediate backup at the main gate. We have a potential Code Red situation. I repeat, Code Red." Sophie continued signing urgently to Elena, pointing repeatedly at the sun's position in the sky. Elena translated quickly. "She's saying the men mentioned something about when the clock strikes 6. The state dinner begins at 7, but the wine service usually starts an hour earlier for the pre-dinner reception." Marcus checked his watch. It was already past 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If Sophie's information was correct, they had less than 4 hours to prevent a catastrophe. But there was still one crucial question that needed answering. Why had Sophie come to warn them now, 3 days after overhearing the conversation? And why hadn't she told her father or any other palace staff member about what she had witnessed? Elena posed these questions to Sophie through sign language. The girl's response sent another chill through the group of adults watching her. Sophie's hands moved in sharp, frightened gestures as she explained that one of the men she had seen was someone she recognized, someone who worked inside the palace and would never believe a child's story about treason. The revelation that one of the conspirators worked inside the palace transformed the situation from urgent to critical. Davies immediately contacted Captain Harrison, the head of palace security, while Marcus stayed with Sophie and Elena to gather more details. Elena continued her careful questioning through sign language, and Sophie's responses painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The girl explained that she had recognized the palace employee because she had seen him many times in the kitchen areas where her father worked. He was someone with legitimate access to sensitive areas of the palace. Sophie's hands moved frantically as she described how she had tried to tell her father about what she had witnessed. But Master Chen, overwhelmed with preparations for the state dinner and dozens of other responsibilities, had dismissed his daughter's attempts at communication as childish games. Sophie's deafness made it difficult for her to communicate complex ideas to people who didn't understand sign language. "She's been trying to find someone who would listen to her for 3 days," Elena translated. She finally decided to come to the guards because she remembered seeing Marcus help a deaf visitor last month. She thought he might understand sign language. Marcus recalled the incident Elena mentioned. An elderly diplomat who was hard of hearing had needed assistance, and Marcus had done his best to communicate through gestures and written notes. Sophie had been watching from a distance with her father that day. Captain Harrison arrived with a team of senior security officers. After Elena quickly briefed him on Sophie's revelations, Harrison's expression became grim. "We need to identify this inside person immediately. Sophie, can you describe what he looks like?" Through Elena's translation, Sophie provided a detailed description of the man she had seen. He was tall with graying hair, wore the dark blue uniform of palace maintenance staff, and had a distinctive scar on his left hand. She also mentioned that he walked with a slight limp. The description immediately clicked for several of the security officers. "That sounds like Thomas Bradley," said Lieutenant Morrison. "He's worked in palace maintenance for about 8 years. Has access to virtually every area of the building for repair work." Captain Harrison's jaw tightened. "Bradley has been acting strangely lately. Called in sick yesterday and the day before, which is unusual for him, and he specifically requested to work the evening shift today." Sophie began signing again urgently, pointing to her drawings. Elena translated. "She's saying the men mentioned meeting again today at 4 o'clock in the old storage room beneath the east wing. They plan to finalize their preparations there." Harrison checked his watch. It was now 3:15. "We have 45 minutes to set up surveillance and catch them in the act. But we need to be careful. If Bradley suspects we know about their plan, he might warn his accomplices or accelerate their timeline." The security team quickly developed a strategy. They would place hidden cameras and listening devices in the storage room Sophie had identified, while other officers discreetly monitored Bradley's movements throughout the palace. Meanwhile, Elena asked Sophie if she could provide any more details about the conversation she had overheard. The girl's response revealed another crucial piece of information. The men had mentioned expecting payment after the job was completed, and one of them had talked about a boat waiting at the harbor to take them away from the country. This wasn't just an assassination plot. It was a professional operation with international implications. Someone with significant resources had hired these men to eliminate the royal family during one of the most high-profile diplomatic events of the year. At exactly 4 o'clock, the hidden cameras in the East Wing storage room captured 2 figures entering the dimly lit space. One was indeed Thomas Bradley, his distinctive limp clearly visible as he moved between the shadows. The other man was someone the security team didn't recognize. A heavy-set individual with a foreign accent and nervous mannerisms. Captain Harrison and his team watched the live feed from a secure monitoring room, with Elena translating as Sophie provided additional details about what she was seeing. The girl's memory proved remarkably accurate as the 2 men moved through the storage area exactly as she had described. The conversation picked up by the hidden microphones was chilling. Bradley and his accomplice discussed their plan to introduce a colorless, odorless poison into the wine bottles that would be served during the pre-dinner reception. The poison was designed to act slowly, with symptoms appearing to be heart attacks or strokes that would affect the victims over the course of several hours. "The beauty of this approach," Bradley was saying to his companion, "is that by the time anyone realizes what's happening, it will be too late. The royal family and half the diplomatic corps will be affected before anyone connects it to the wine." The foreign man nodded nervously. "And you're certain you can access the wine storage without being detected?" Bradley laughed coldly. "I've been working in this palace for 8 years. I know every corridor, every entrance, every blind spot in the security system. No one questions a maintenance worker pushing a cart through the service areas." Harrison's team prepared to move in and arrest the conspirators, but they needed to let the conversation continue long enough to gather evidence about the full scope of the plot. They needed to know who had hired these men and whether there were other accomplices. The breakthrough came when Bradley's companion mentioned their handler. "Victor said the payment would be transferred to our accounts as soon as we confirm the job is complete. $500,000 each plus extraction to South America." The name Victor immediately triggered alerts in the security database. Viktor Kozlov was a known international assassin with connections to several hostile foreign governments. His involvement suggested this was more than just a criminal plot. It was likely an act of state-sponsored terrorism designed to destabilize the country's diplomatic relationships, as the two men prepared to leave the storage room with small vials of poison, concealed in Bradley's maintenance kit. Harrison gave the signal for his team to move in. The arrest was swift and decisive, with both conspirators taken into custody before they could reach the wine storage area. But the investigation was far from over. During questioning, Bradley revealed that there was a third accomplice, someone working in the kitchen staff who was supposed to provide backup access to the food and beverage service if the wine plan failed. Sophie, still watching the proceedings through Elena's translations, suddenly became agitated. She began signing rapidly, pointing toward the kitchen areas of the palace. Elena translated her urgent message. She's saying she remembers seeing a third person that night, someone she recognized from the kitchen staff but couldn't identify, clearly in the shadows. The girl's exceptional memory and observational skills had proven invaluable, but now they needed her help one more time to identify the final conspirator before the state dinner began in just 2.5 hours. With time running short, Captain Harrison made the decision to bring Sophie directly to the kitchen areas where she could potentially identify the third conspirator. Elena accompanied them, continuing to serve as translator while Sophie's father, Master Chen, was quietly briefed on the situation. Master Chen's face went pale when he learned about his daughter's crucial role in uncovering the assassination plot. Through Elena, he apologized to Sophie for not taking her attempts at communication seriously. The emotional reunion between father and daughter provided a brief moment of warmth amid the tense security operation. Sophie moved through the busy kitchen areas with Elena and the security team, carefully observing each staff member as they prepared for the evening state dinner. The kitchen was bustling with activity as dozens of chefs, servers, and assistants worked on elaborate dishes for the 50 expected guests. After nearly 30 minutes of careful observation, Sophie suddenly grabbed Elena's arm and began signing urgently. She had spotted someone who matched her memory of the third person from that night 3 days ago. Elena translated Sophie's identification. She's pointing to the woman working at the dessert station, the one with the blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Sophie says she remembers seeing her talking quietly with the two men near the storage room. The woman Sophie had identified was Margaret Walsh, a pastry chef who had worked at the palace for 2 years. She had an excellent reputation and no obvious motives for treason. But when security officers discreetly checked her background, they discovered several concerning details. Margaret had significant gambling debts that had recently become much worse. Her bank accounts showed she was facing financial ruin, and she had been making inquiries about quick ways to earn large amounts of money. The financial pressure made her a perfect target for recruitment by professional criminals. As officers moved to arrest Margaret, she noticed the security presence and attempted to flee through the kitchen's back entrance. But Sophie, who had been watching carefully, saw Margaret grab something from her workstation before running. Through Elena's translation, Sophie urgently reported that Margaret had taken a small container from near the dessert preparations. The security team realized that the backup plan involved poisoning the elaborate chocolate desserts that were scheduled to be served at the end of the state dinner. The chase through the palace corridors was brief but intense. Margaret was apprehended before she could dispose of the evidence, and the container she had grabbed was indeed filled with the same type of poison that Bradley and his accomplice had planned to use in the wine. With all 3 conspirators in custody and the poison secured, the immediate threat to the royal family and diplomatic guests was eliminated. The state dinner proceeded as scheduled, though with significantly enhanced security measures and thorough testing of all food and beverages. Later that evening, after the successful conclusion of the diplomatic event, Captain Harrison personally thanked Sophie for her courage and persistence. Through Elena's translation, he told her that her actions had quite literally saved the lives of dozens of important people and prevented an international incident that could have led to war. Marcus, the guard who had first chosen to ignore protocol and listen to Sophie's desperate attempt at communication, was commended for his intuition and decision-making. His willingness to break standard procedures had been the crucial first step in unraveling the entire conspiracy. Sophie's father, Master Chen, made sure to learn basic sign language in the weeks that followed, ensuring that his daughter would never again struggle to communicate important information to those around her. The palace also implemented new training programs to help staff members communicate with disabled visitors and employees. International investigation that followed revealed that Viktor Kozlov had been hired by a hostile foreign government seeking to destabilize diplomatic relationships and create chaos within the country's leadership. The successful prevention of the assassination plot strengthened security protocols and demonstrated the importance of taking every potential threat seriously, regardless of its source.